There we go. My name is Jacob Austin, and we're doing our presentation on the murder of Charles Manson.
So my name is Thomas, and I'll be doing the basic profiling questions on the brainstorm of Charles Manson. So basically what happened was in the summer of 1969, Charles Manson directed his followers, known as the Manson family, to commit a series of brutal murders in Los Angeles, California. The most infamous of these murders occurred on the nights of August 8th and 9th, 1969, at the homes of actress Sharon Tate and supermarket executive Leno LaBianca. So many question the motive of why Charles Manson committed this murder. Manson believed in an apocalyptic race war, which he called Helter Skelter, inspired by the lyrics from the Beatles' White Album. He believed that the murders would incite this race war and that he and his followers would emerge as leaders of a new society. Some of the influences were Manson's troubled childhood, his experiences with crime and incarceration, and his manipulation of vulnerable individuals all played a role in the shaping his worldview. He was also influenced by a mix of countercultural movements of the 1960s, including the hippie movement and the emerging culture of rebellion against societal norms. So some of Manson's early childhood years was an adolescence and adult years was when he was born on November 12th, 1934 in Cincinnati, Ohio to Kathleen Maddox, who was a 16-year-old unmarried woman. Manson's childhood was marked by instability and neglect. His mother was often absent, and he was raised by various relatives and institutions. He frequently got in trouble with the law during his adolescence, committing various petty crimes. During his adolescence, he spent much of his teenage years in reform schools and juvenile detention centers due to his delinquent behavior. Despite attempts at rehabilitation, Manson's behavior continued to escalate, and he became increasingly involved in criminal activities. In his early adult years, Manson drifted through a series of jobs and criminal activities, including pimping and theft. He was in and out of jail for most of this period, serving multiple short prison sentences for crimes ranging from theft to parole violations. Manson became increasingly involved in drugs, particularly LSD, and developed a small following of mostly young women who were attracted to a charismatic personality and unconventional philosophies. Next slide. So, Helter Skelter was a song by the Beatles that Charles Manson interpreted as a message for him, predicting interracial war in the United States, seen as a main motive for the Manson murders. This was the song that inspired.
The connection that they had found was that Peace had mentioned to his family and coworkers that he was going to meet.
So I'll be discussing the crimes of Charles Manson, most particularly the Tate LaBianca murders in August 1969. Manson and his followers committed a series of brutal murders throughout the Los Angeles area. Victims included popular actor Sharon Tate, who was 8 months pregnant at the time, Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger, sorry for mispronouncing, Yoich Ryoski, Stephen Parent, Gary Hitman, Donald Shen, and Leno and Rosemary LaBianca. Sharon Tate begged for killers to spare her baby. They did not. The victims were stabbed, shot, and beaten repeatedly. The killers wrote the words pig and helter skelter on the walls in the victim's blood. Victims of the murders include Sharon Tate, who was an actress, Abigail Folger, who was Coffee Harris, Wojciech Forsky, screenplay writer, Jay Sebring, celebrity hairstylist, Stephen Parent, friend of the property caretaker, Gary Hidman, musician and friend of the Manson family, Leno and Rosemary LaBianca, owners of a chain grocery store, and Donald Shea, Hollywood stuntman and actor. So discussing the prosecution, sentencing, and the final disposition. In the prosecution had a key witness that could tie the Tate and LaBianca murders to the Manson family. The prosecution, Lynn Cabecian, who decided to testify in exchange for prosecution immunity. Linda Castellan was a member of the Manson family who was present at the murders. In the sentencing, Manson and his followers were found guilty of murder and sentenced to death. However, due to California abolishing the death penalty, Manson and his followers were sentenced to life in prison. In the final decision for Charles Manson was found guilty of first-degree murder and was conspiracy to murder, was sentenced to death but overturned to life in prison due to the temporary abolishment of death penalty in California. He remained in prison for the remainder of his life until his death in 2017.
I'll be going over the external factors. Not letting me go back. Some of the external factors are the cultural involvement. Manson emerged in the 1960s with a time of significance of social appeal and cultural rebellion. There's also a big drug culture. A lot of people were doing drugs, particularly a lot of psychedelics like LSD. Those are very prominent during like Manson's time, and his entire family was in drugs, and that's how he manipulated people. There's also a big issue with the legal system, and it failed him in many different steps. All the criminal activities that he did weren't addressed correctly, and to the system that was priorly there before the murders, and he was able to evade a lot of the crimes he would do. Manson was also reportedly influenced by certain songs, like we said earlier, like the Beatles. They believed that they were sending him messages throughout them about a race war. Other external factors are the cultural tensions. And we know that in the 60s, the racial tensions were very high with the civil rights movements and conflicts such as the Watts riots. This made like an atmosphere for Manson to believe he could be racist. There is also his charismatic leadership. Even though he did do a lot of bad things, he was viewed as a good leader because he was able to manipulate people to make him do whatever he wanted by his charm. And also his social isolation. He wouldn't let any of his followers talk to anyone else. He would like completely isolate them from society and only allow them to like know stuff from one another.
For the internal factors, Manson already had a manipulative nature. He was adept at manipulating others and using his charm and persuasion to exert influence over his followers. This manipulative skill likely played a significant role in his ability to orchestrate the crimes committed by the Manson family. He also had a lot of psychological trauma. He experienced a turbulent childhood marked by a lot of neglect and abuse, including time in juvenile detention centers. These experiences likely contributed to the development of psychological issues such as antisocial personality disorder. For narcissistic personality traits, Manson exhibited grandiosity, a sense of entitlement, and a need for admiration, suggesting narcissistic tendencies. This could have fueled his desire for power and control over others. And for delusional beliefs, Manson held delusional beliefs about an impending race war, which he called Helter Skelter. These beliefs fueled his desire to incite chaos and violence, as he saw himself as a messianic figure guiding his followers through the apocalypse. For his criminal history, Manson had a history of criminal behavior, including theft and parole violations, which likely desensitized him to the consequences of his actions and also facilitated his involvement in more serious crime. Manson was also known to abuse various drugs, including psychedelics like LSD, which could have exacerbated his existing psychological issues and influenced his current behavior, potentially leading to increased impulsivity and aggression. For social alienation, Manson experienced a lot of rejection and alienation from mainstream society, which may have fostered feelings of resentment and a desire for revenge against the perceived injustices he faced. This social alienation could have contributed to his willingness to engage in extreme acts of violence. Manson also demonstrated a profound lack of empathy for others, viewing them as mere objects to be manipulated for his own purposes rather than real people. This lack of empathy would have made it easier for him to justify and commit heinous acts of violence.
So why did Charles Manson do it? The biggest reason of why people believe Charles Manson did it was his mental health. He was never diagnosed with anything specifically, but he displayed a lot of manipulative and delusional tendencies. All the psychiatric help that he tried, they all evaluated him as the same thing: antisocial personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, and a lot of people even said he might be schizophrenic and have those type of issues. All these conditions are marked by the lack of empathy he had, his manipulative behavior, and like his distorted thinking. No, there was no formal evaluation of Manson, meaning the diagnoses are unreliable. In Manson's case, is complex and a subject of debate amongst mental health professionals and legal experts.
The Manson family was a notorious cult led by Charles Manson,